Washington football. Woo! Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Burgundy Zone. I am your host, Kyle. I will not be joined by my co-host just yet. They'll be here in a couple minutes. But joining us for this episode, the title is Hittin' the Sled with my man Coach Kedric Golston. Thank you so much for joining me on this Sunday afternoon, sir. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I appreciate you having me on.
Yes, sir. It's been a while, but ever since we've gotten last time to be able to interview you, become the head coach of Stonebridge. So first things first, I wanted to ask you what your first year as head coach was like.
It was a great learning experience. My senior class was amazing. They handled the transition probably as better than expected. We started off slow, a little sluggish, but I think we did some good things throughout the year to definitely build upon this upcoming season. So we're excited about it. Got a ton of support from the school, the community, the players are buying in. So it's a super exciting time for Stonebridge football.
Absolutely, and everyone knows that later on in your career, you were almost like a mentor. You really helped guys on defensively, right? Did that kind of help prepare you for being a head coach? Did you see some similarities there?
Obviously, it's all about developing young people, right? And so whether it's at the high school level, the college level, or pro level, right? We're all at different parts of our journeys. But the great thing about football is some of those same things. Once you're a freshman in high school, it's like your first year college student or a rookie in the NFL. So, some of the same ups and downs, learning the process of how to become a better player, both on and off the field. So and things of that nature, it's just, when you want to see people do their best, it's kind of natural just to pour into them, just like people poured into me, right? So it's kind of like that circle of life of football, right? I had great mentors, great coaches, great people in the community that poured into me, that helped me, live out my dream of playing in the NFL. So it's just me trying to return that favor.
And it was kind of crazy, like a full circle moment. Your team, your Stonebridge, went against Logan Paulson's coach team. How did that game go?
Oh man, ton of respect for Logan. That's obviously like a rivalry here. Those high schools are a few miles apart, and we started off fast, but Logan, Independence made a couple plays towards the end, and we ended up losing 14-10. So much respect for him. Love what he's doing. He's great for this community and that school over there. So. It was just one of those things where actually it was the Commanders game of the week. So we had
Fred Smoot was there.
Fred was there. Rocky McIntosh was there. Major Teddy was there. So it was just a great environment for the community and just a great football game. Unfortunately, the Bulldogs did not come out on top that night.
Oh, but they will next time, Coach Ked. Unfortunately for Logan and his team, of course. But there's a lot of similarities with you taking over, obviously, a high school team where you, like you talked about, that senior class having like basically to buy in for that last year, coming from a previous regime with Dan Quinn and company and what they walked into last year. Obviously, they brought in Jaden Daniels, and you played for this. You obviously are in the area. You played for this team. You know how hungry this fan base is. What was it like for you watching with Jaden Daniels and the Washington Commanders and what they were able to do in getting to the NFC Championship game?
Man, what I saw from afar was just Josh Harris, um, the general manager, Dan Quinn, really the whole franchise pouring into one another, right? I look at them trying to put Jaden in the best situation to go out there and to have success with Coach Kingsbury. But then not only that, every player. You know what I mean? Obviously, he's the second pick of the draft, but I believe that they're all about developing, whether you're the first guy on the roster or the 53rd guy on the roster. And I think we could see that throughout the year because people played to their abilities, right? And so I'm a firm believer in Coach Quinn and the culture that he's trying to build. I believe it's a sincere culture that's rooted in accountability and brotherhood, right? And so there's not much room for rules when you want to be accountable and you want to have the respect of your brother. So I think out of that, they got a great collection of guys that love playing football. They're intentional about developing those relationships both on and off the field that just carry a bunch of weight when the season gets tough or you're tired or you don't really feel like it, because it's not just about you,
Mm.
it's about your teammate and the culture that they built. And we've all seen the locker rooms after the games, man, and you talk about an electrical moment
Yeah.
where it's just about the joy of playing with your brother.
Absolutely. And we saw that time and time again. Kendrick, one of the things that the fan base, I would imagine the coaching staff is really invested into is being able to stop the run, especially from the edges, but also on the perimeter. They added a guy, a safety in Harris, and they brought in Jay Jones from the Patriots, a corner who they both like to stick their head in the mud and get dirty in the run game, so to speak. But as a defensive lineman, what would you teach either to young guys or even professionals? How can you set the edge better just by what you already have?
I just think it just goes back to understanding your role and your responsibility and repetition, right? I mean, we look at some of the struggles from a rushing standpoint, and sometimes that's a defensive lineman, sometimes it's a linebacker, sometimes it's just a good call or a good play
Mm.
by the offense. That being said, I hate to say do your job, but from a defensive lineman perspective, it's like, listen, are you coming off the ball? Are you being violent through your gap? And are you hustling to the ball, right? And so you rinse and repeat that. I know Coach Tapp, Coach Kerrigan, uh, and and my guy over there, I'm forgetting his name right now, are doing a great job of setting those defensive linemen up for success. Obviously, there was a little bit of a transition of the new scheme that they were running with the wide nine, so on and so forth. So just that repetition. Obviously, I think Javon Kinlaw, coming from that system in San Fran and in New York, is going to be a huge kind of shock to that defense. So I'm just excited to
Okay.
see them in year two, just becoming more familiar with one another, coaches to players, players to coaches. So, and by the way, and I'll say this, right, we want them to stop the run, but also understand that it's a pass first league. You know what I mean? And so ultimately, if things are working the way that they should, we should be scoring anywhere between 28 to 35 points a game, and we're rushing the passer, right? And so at the end of the day, um, no defensive coach or no defensive lineman wants people to run the ball on you, because that's like a manhood type check. But at the end of the day, I know they're doing the right things to be able to go out there and stop the run on a consistent basis.
I absolutely loved hearing what you had to say about Javon Kinlaw because that was one of the probably the mixed emotions from fans in that acquiring Javon Kinlaw. Just from a grand scheme of things, you talked about what he could be a shock to this defensive line. What do you think that he brings?
I think he has been brought up in this system as a professional, right? And so there's not a right or wrong thing, but when you have guys that were 3, 4 guys that came out of different schemes, he has the whole entire time he's been in the NFL, it's been in this wide nine, penetrate, react, attack type mentality. So there's no unlearning he has to do,
Okay.
because this is the system that he knows. This is the system that has got him paid, for lack of a better term, right? So he's confident in the system because he understands that there's a reward at the end of it based off of his play and his production. And he's seen other defensive linemen have a ton of success in it.
I absolutely agree with you. And you already talked about Coach Kerrigan and Coach Daryl Tapp, obviously former teammates of yours. Kind of talk about what do you think that they bring to a coaching staff? Obviously, you being a head coach of a high school team, of course, but what do you think they bring in being able to develop these guys?
Yeah, and don't let me forget Sharif Floyd. I forgot about him. And,
Oh,
and so what you have with those is you have 3 guys that did it at a high level, right? So not only can they teach it on the board, but they've seen it looking out of the face mask, right? So they've been sore. They understand the stresses that defensive linemen have on them. And so from there, it's just an extra bonus. And by the way, you got a bunch of guys that love playing football, that care about the next level of defensive linemen. So, um, they're pouring everything they have into them, and then I believe just they're able to speak on kind of specific instances and techniques that you just can't get unless you've played it. You know what I mean? Because
mm-hmm.
we all talk about how it's drawn up on the board, but then there's a way that it's drawn up and there's a way that it's played, and sometimes those things intersect and sometimes they don't. But I believe that they've done a great job just relating setting a high expectation because they did it at a high level, but also meeting the guys where they're at in order to give them the tools to be able to go out there and be successful.
Absolutely. And Washington, in this kind of free agency and via trades, they have added in the trenches. They traded for Laramie Tunsil from the Houston Texans, who's one of the premier left tackles in the NFL. Great thing for this football team. But they also added a guy like Eddie Goldman. You talked about Javon Kinlaw. Do you think that that's from looking at this team from last season, they're on the right path to be able to stabilize things?
What I think Coach Quinn, Adam Peters, and his staff is doing is they identify traits in players that fit what it is they want them to do.
Okay.
Right. And so everybody would like to have an all pro at every position, a first ballot Hall of Famer, but that's not the NFL, right? So at the end of the day, if you're playing at this level, you do something excellent, right? So they find guys that fit their system the way that what the guys do at a high level. They put them in positions to go out there and accentuate their strengths, you know what I mean, work on their weaknesses. And that's really what I see. They're putting guys in positions to go out there and have success. They're creating a role from them. They're asking players to dominate their role and then continue to do that day in and day out.
And last couple questions for you before I let you get out of here. Obviously, time is valuable for yourself, Coach Golston. But what if you could say what was the most surprising thing when you became a head coach? Was something that maybe you weren't expecting, or was really joyful, or just something that surprised you?
Well, I think, more so than that, I consider it a great joy and honor to be able to be the head coach of these young men. Nothing really surprised me. It's just going through it the first time, right?
Okay.
So there's things you don't think about, like, who's doing the laundry after the games, who's ordering the snacks, creating schedules, just the things that come up, disciplinary action, so on and so forth,
Right.
things that you know about, but on a day-to-day basis, just how can I do it better, right? So I'm always, self-evaluating is, am I doing the best job I can do for this school and this team? And so at the end of the day, I ask my players to be accountable. I'm asking me and my coaches to be accountable to understand that, yes, sometimes we can redirect, right? If we figure out a better way to do things, that's what we're going to do, because it's not about egos. It's not about who's right or wrong. It's about doing the best we can as a football team to go out there and hopefully win a lot of football games and compete for a state championship.
Absolutely love to hear it. My next one for you. Washington traded for Marshawn Lattimore later on to the season. He was new onto this defense. You kind of talked about like that kind of change of the system, so to speak. But also he was kind of injured, had to get back healthy. But it's been very harsh criticism of Marshawn Lattimore and that trade. If you were on this team today, what would be your message to the fan base regarding Marshawn Lattimore?
Oh, I mean, listen, this is a guy who has proven to do it at a high level against some of the premier. I mean, you look at the NFC South and the guys he's played against year in and year out, 2 times a year. I mean, he's had trial by fire. Obviously, all hamstrings aren't created equal. You know what I mean? And when you have a guy that is physical and plays out there on the highway like he does, sometimes those hamstrings just linger a lot. Not to mention he's changing cities. It's a different defensive scheme. You know what I mean? And it's not about whether or not you understand it. It's just, now you're playing with a new safety that you didn't have a training camp with, you didn't have an OTAs, you got a new linebacker in there, so on and so forth. So at the end of the day, fans are going to be fans, and we love them because they are fans, and we appreciate that. But ultimately, this guy's a proven player in this league, right? He's coming back from injury. He's unknown to us, but he's known in the NFL. So he's one of us. So we got to love on him. We got to get him healthy, and we know he'll go out there and do a great job for us.
And last one, I want to bring this back to the high school game. Is there anybody you're coaching right now or coached against that you think is going to be a name for everyone to monitor at the next level?
Well, I think, there's a lot of great the thing I like about high school is you see players that will not play will not play on Saturdays and Sundays, but they're just hard-nosed football players, right? They're playing, I consider high school football, Friday Night Lights, the most purest form of the game, right? And so there's a ton of great talent. Brady Carmichael out of Briarwoods High School is going to the Naval Academy.
Okay.
Christian Evans, Stonebridge Bulldog, is an early enrollee at Virginia Tech.
Yeah.
So there's a ton of talent that comes out of this Northern Virginia area, and I'm just excited to see them go out there and have great careers and get their education and just be all that they can be. So that's really the excitement for me. So Christian Evans is down there right now, tearing it up at Virginia Tech. Brady Carmichael is going to go to the Naval Academy. We got some other kids. Amari Kamara is an outside linebacker from Stonebridge going to Indiana. So there's a lot of good football players here in the Northern Virginia area.
My man, I really appreciate your time, Kendrick, being able to come on here and talk to us. God bless you. I hope you continued success. I'm really excited to see how things develop for you there at Stonebridge, and hopefully you can keep developing these young men, because I know that's a big responsibility, and you're the right man for the job, sir. I can't thank you enough for this opportunity. I hope you enjoy your Sunday and your time with your family, sir.
Y'all have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you,
Appreciate
Kendrick. All right, everybody, we just spoke with the man, Mr. Kedric Golston. I love that guy, man.
Yeah, man. I wish I could have hopped on earlier.
And now we are joined by my co-host, Mr. Michael Hall. How are you doing, sir?
Good, man. Been a busy weekend, riding around with the family and the baby everywhere, but we here now.
Yes, we are. And before we are joined by our next guest, who is going to be here probably in about 20 minutes or so, but let's answer some fan questions that were submitted. The first one was submitted by the Colonel, and his question is, Hall, obviously, our biggest need is still pass rusher. Are we at the point we can make some luxury picks like running back, or are we still deepening our trenches and secondary?
Yeah, I think all three of those are on the table, but I think that the way that I said this on Twitter, but I think the way that they set it up right now is with all the little moves they've made and little signings they've made here and there, like they've made it so they can trade back at 29. They can take the best player available at 29, whatever position they deem worthy of that best player available. They could trade 29 for a star player and some change, obviously for a star player or something like that. They could trade back at 61 in the second round. They could take the best player available in the second round at 61. They could trade 61 and some change for a player. So they've kept all avenues open, all options open. Yeah, at the end of the day, a lot of the draft pundits are saying that between picks, let's call it 30 to 40 or 20 to 40, somewhere around that range, the players are kind of graded out the same. So you're getting kind of the same player as far as like it's just about how your board looks and how you grade the players yourself as a front office. So, yeah, I would say that if there's an edge on the board that they like, I would see them taking the edge. If there's a running back on the board, like an Amarion Hampton or something like that, that they think can be their Jahmyr Gibbs, I can see them going that route. If there's a cornerback or a secondary player on the board, I can see them going that route. Or if someone wants to trade up, I can see them going that route. So, yeah, all options are open, but I could definitely see them. If I had to make a choice, I'd probably say it's 50-50 on best player available or them trading back at 29.
Yeah, I don't think that we are at a point of being able to get a luxury pick at 29. I think, Colonel, this question is based on the trenches and corner, right? But I will say this. There is the plethora of pass rushers in this draft class is immense. And so they could go down the route, like Hall said, of trading back and possibly getting a wide receiver like a Jaden Higgins from Iowa State. I talked to Trevor Sycamore on Wednesday. He talked he'd be a perfect fit for Washington as the X receiver, right? Or they could go down the route of getting one of these corners that they could be able to put into this situation with multiple corners in the mix. Obviously, they added Jay Jones. They brought back Noah Igbenogany. They have Marshawn Lattimore, Mikey Sammers still. So it's almost like adding a strength there. But I would say they're probably still looking at strong safety as a place that they could go down that route, right? I personally love Andrew Makuba. But honestly, I was watching, because we have a draft show tonight, I was watching Nick Scorton from Texas A&M, and he put on a lot of weight, but man, this guy is an incredible player, and I think that he would obviously fit in here. I know one of our big fans loves James Pierce. Personally, for me, I like James Pierce. I think that burst is real. His get off the line of scrimmage is very, very quick. It's very fast. But he doesn't finish in tackles and sacks. And if they can guarantee me that they can fix that with James Pierce, then I'm all on board. But that's just one of my concerns. So I don't think that this team is necessarily ready for luxury picks. I much more will argue that this draft class, there's so many guys like a Braden Swinson and Antoine Powell-Ryland. There is, you talked about James Pierce, Nick Scourton, Donovan Ezericu, who most likely might not even be there. at 29 or James Pierce. But just saying that there's a plethora of really good pass rushers in this class that they could go down that route of just saying, well, this area of need that we don't have much depth in, like safety, could be added here, and we feel comfortable with the depth of going to get one of these edge rushers if we were to trade back in the second or third because of how many guys that there are. And I will also make the argument of with running back, there is a lot of running backs in this class, and I'd be willing to argue that Anthony Lynn and company can get a lot out of a UDFA. And you would actually necessarily might not even need to go and use one of those picks on a running back. But if it's a premium position that they are looking at to say we need the most pop on to be able to take some eyes away from Jaden Daniels, I'm willing to go down that route. I'm not sure if it's going to be with the top overall pick. I do think there's still work in the trenches to be done. In my personal opinion, if you add a very good running back in here, like a Omarion Hampton, I don't think going against Philly, that's going to fix all your issues. You still need those meat and potatoes. You still need that edge guy to be able, and like you said, Colonel, to be able to plant your flag on that, so to speak. But it's a
Only
great
thing I'll
question.
say is you can't draft just to trying to, okay, Philly's doing this and we got to counter Philly this way. You still got to draft to what's best for your team and what's overall for the team. So,
Can I argue
like I
that?
said, huh?
Can I argue that?
No. Yeah, you can. But I'm just saying, like, you see what a guy like Jameer, and obviously they built up the line in Detroit before Jameer Gibbs got there and they kept on adding to it. But you see what a guy like Jameer Gibbs did for Ben Johnson and Jared Goff in that offense. So, like I said, I don't see them really going the running back route, but if they think that Omarion Hampton or whatever running back at 29 is still on the board right there, which will probably be all of them except Genty, maybe they look like, okay, he can transform our offense into a way more explosive offense than what we thought it already could be, a la what Jameer Gibbs brings to the Detroit Lions. So, again, I'm at the point now where I'm going to trust Adam Peters, but like you said, I don't really see them going the running back route because the draft is so deep with running backs. But yeah, I could definitely see them like a day 2 or day 3 pick for running back. But yeah, I don't see them going like 29 unless Genty somehow falls all the way to 29.
I'll take the Air Force slogan, aim high, right? If you're building your football team to specifically beat the Philadelphia Eagles, and if you're able to be successful in that, you're probably beating 80 to 90% of the league. And that's just in my personal opinion. So that's what I mean by aiming high. If you're building your football team to be able to run on that defensive line, if you're building your football team in order for that offensive line to not be able to run on you and pass protect you, there's a lot of teams in this league that you're going to be successful against. And that's the only point that I'm making is that's a team that you're going to have to face twice in your schedule and possibly again in the playoffs if you do make it there. And they are a very high meter in the terms of what they have built as a football team. They don't have very many areas of need. And so that if you're aiming to be able to beat that, there's going to be a lot of teams in this league that can't compete with you. And that's a very good start for this football team. Obviously, you want to be able to beat everybody in the league, but you want to go with the premier teams to say, we want to be able to compete with them. We have to build our football team to be able to in those moments because getting 55 put on you in an NFC Championship game is disgusting, to say the least. Now, the next question from the Colonel Hall. What was your biggest good surprise and bad surprise about free agency? For me, the good was acquiring Laramie Tunsil. The bad was the departure of Alamadi Zacchaeus.
Yeah, I would definitely say, how could you not say the good? The best of the good is the Laramie Tunsil acquisition. That literally came out of left field. I mean, like Lil Wayne said, real G's move in silence like lasagna. AP is a real G, just waiting in the wings, just waiting in the rafters. Like, okay, bam, now I'm gonna pounce. And I know that Albert Breer was talking about like it was kind of known around a couple teams, like the Texans were kind of shopping him, just like calling left tackle needy teams, like, hey, we're not gonna give him this third contract, so if you want to make an offer for him, like, you know, like let us know, get back to us. So I'm glad that AP took that call and took it seriously and said, okay, this is going to upgrade our offense times 10. It's going to create probably or solve two problems on offensive line as far as left tackle and whether it be right tackle or interior, whatever route they want to go with Coleman. So yeah, love that move. The bad, I would say, I would say losing Jeremy Chin just because he was such an addition for this defense last year. Seemed like he was a really good dude in the locker room. Everyone loved him. Talked about how much he loved playing for Dan Quinn and and all the guys in the locker room. So was kind of mad that they lost him. And yeah, I guess that would be my bad. I guess technically, like, this is not really my bad, but I guess the bad could be they didn't go out and spend on the big names like a lot of fans thought they would because they had so much cap space. But that's not really my bad. But I know that's a lot of other people's kind of bad part of free agency where they didn't go out and put one of these star big name players in free agency added to the roster.
Uh, the good surprise. It's not even a surprise, but Benjamin St. Juste leaving. Round of applause. I he was not good in the run game. He was not. He was very shy of contact, and obviously in inopportune times, he always seemed to be at the wrong end of things. Very happy about that. The other good surprise is Marcus Mariota. I talked about it like I asked you the question a while back, right? Like, what would be the most surprising returning player to the football team? The one I said was Marcus Mariota because there were obviously teams looking to acquire him. They were hearing about Miami, right? But Marcus wanting to come back here was obviously very important. And I think the quote from Zach Ertz in his press conference after re-signing was fantastic when he's, quote unquote, I needed to be here. And that's the type of thing that is growing here in Washington, is that need to be here. Look, players will say all day that they want to go play for Washington, but at the end of the day, it comes down to the dollar amount, right?
Oh, yeah, exactly.
Right, but when you see that pen come to paper, so to speak, with these players saying, "I want to be there," obviously we have to. When the rubber meets the road, it's going to come down to that dollar amount, like Jeremy Chin, so to speak, and Diami Brown as well, and Dante Fowler. God bless you, Dante. I hope you good luck to you, but it's going to be rough.
And to your point about like players, like to say that players, like, I do think there is players like throughout the league that are like, yeah, I want to get to Washington. I want to play for Dan Quinn. I want to play with Jaden Daniels, da 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 da. But to your point, that's more, I feel like that tweet and that little information that Adam Schefter put out there and whatnot was geared towards like the guys that have already gotten their second contract, the veterans that are like, hey, I still got some juice left. I know what I can add to a team. I want to try to ring chase, kind of, sort of. I want to play for a contender, and that's for like the veteran guys, the guys that are getting their second contract, getting paid like their big contract for the first time. Sure, we're going to be in the mix as far as like, okay, if like the dollar amount is almost the same, like I might choose Washington because I want to play there. Da, 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 da. But if the offers aren't close and the money's better over there, yeah, I love Jaden. I like what they're building over there, but I'm gonna get my bag. So, like you said, it really comes down to the money at the end of the day. But Washington will always be in those conversations because of Jaden, AP, and Dan Quinn. It's just when they want to spend the money when it comes down to it eventually.
Yeah, and then the bad surprise for me, Colonel, would be losing Mykal Walker, it was widely talked about that he was the backup to Bobby Wagner because he could make those call outs. He could call the defense to the rest of the guys, right? So losing Mykal Walker, not that many people are talking about this, but now creates a need at depth for linebacker behind Bobby. Somebody who could step in and be able to play that middle linebacker, call out the defense. We can bring up Jordan McGee, but has Jordan McGee been there enough to be able to warrant the confidence to say that he can step into that role and be able to succeed in that regard? I know people were even talking about Frankie Louvu moving over to play middle linebacker. I don't want that. Frankie Louvu is at his best when you take the chain off him and you say, go get him. Go get me some dinner tonight. You know what I'm saying? When you're out goose hunting. That's what Bobby Wagner is. He's a dog, and I don't want him to get slowed down at all by having to be the field general. So one of the bad surprises is losing Mykal Walker because it now creates a need behind Bobby Wagner. And with the draft picks only having 5 currently at the moment, Washington has a first rounder, 29, second, number 61, a fourth at 128, a sixth at 205, and a seventh at 245. I talked about a Jay Higgins from Iowa with Trevor Sycamore on Wednesday, but there's also another linebacker, maybe Jalen Walker from Indiana, who obviously is from the area. Serge commented on my Twitter and talked about him, but he's more so of like a hybrid type of DB / linebacker. But just speaking to, that's now currently a need, and when you're looking at the draft picks, where is that going to fit in there, right? And they haven't added anybody to step into that regard, right? So I think that's one of my bad surprises so far that I would say.
No, that's a good one.
All right, now the next one that we have, we're going to go to our Discord for this. This is from Andy Lockhart in the UK in the 1 Point Safety Show. If you guys haven't yet, go follow the 1 Point Safety Show. Obviously, Andy Lockhart is there, but the star of the show is Mr. Scott Hartley, who is going to be.
Buddy.
Yeah, he actually got selected as the UK Fan of the Year, so he's actually be going to the draft and announcing one of the draft picks, which is obviously such a huge honor, and it couldn't have happened.
Yeah, that's so lit.
When I legitimately tell you that this is a fantastic individual, like in all aspects, it's Scott Hartley. But regardless, his question is, Hall, what position are you most confident we will select at 29?
That's a good one. I mean, it's still early in the process. We're like a month and a half out still from the draft, but
And this is like not trading back. He's specifically saying at 29.
So I guess if you want to look at what they've done in free agency, the moves they've made, I could see them at 29 going. What's the safety from South Carolina? Nick
Emenwari.
Yeah, I could see them. He probably won't be there at 29 because that dude is a freak. But I could
He'll
definitely see him. I could definitely see him being like a piece that Dan Quinn and Joe Witt look at. Like he can be our guy that we move all over the defense. Our Kyle Hamilton, like in Baltimore per se. But yeah, I would say between him and if Donovan, I call Donovan E from Boston College.
Eziriku.
Yeah, led the nation in sacks last year at Boston College. Again, I don't think he'll be on the board, but if he is, I would be running that card up there at 29.
Yeah, and that's the good thing about being at 29, Andy, is that the edge rushers with who could possibly be there, like that's why Washington, it's almost weird for them because they want a lot of quarterbacks to be drafted. So like that way there's more talent at 29, so to speak. But also in the same breath, you don't want that many quarterbacks drafted because you want somebody quarterback needy to say, I have to jump up in there to 29 to be able to take that away from you.
That's a good place for somebody if they want that fifth-year option for
Exactly.
Jackson Dart.
Exactly. And so like that's what I'm kind of talking about. It's like double-edged sword, right, so to speak. But if they were to sit at 29, I think it's edge. The talent level of the edge class, especially the top tier stuff, watching Nick Scourton, even when going back to Purdue, they had him lining up on running backs in pass coverage, and he was running toe-to-toe with them. He transfers to Texas A&M for his junior year, which was this year, and he put on a lot of weight, and he still came up with 5 sacks. Obviously, in 2023, he had 10 at Purdue. But when you watch him versus Michigan, first play of the game, he's making a stop in the run game. And he goes to Texas A&M, which really hammered down that they wanted to stop the run. So Nick Scourton really took, from a pass rushing standpoint, took a step back in production, but really gained the knowledge and ability to be able to produce in the run game as well. He has a very high motor. I think they would be great for Washington at 29. We've already talked about James Pierce and company, but if you want to start dominating in the trenches against the best of the best that the league has to offer, edge is where you go to at 29, in my personal, honest opinion. I don't like Nick Emenwari that much. I actually would put Andrew Makuba over Nick Emenwari if you just go watch the film versus Georgia or the film versus Oklahoma. You'll see him making some outstanding plays on the ball and also coming up in the run game. He's one of those guys that likes to get muddy and dirty, and I would take Andrew Makuba any day of the week to be on my football team, to be perfectly honest with you. So my honest question, I think it's edge at 29. Now the next question is from Arch Deluxe. What is your biggest surprise player that returned? Mine is Farrell.
Biggest surprise player.
I know the Colonel kind of asked this already.
Yeah. Biggest surprise return. I would say I was surprised that they brought back. Honestly, yeah, I would go with Mariota. Like you said earlier, just because I know Pete Carroll and Chip Kelly are out there in Las Vegas, and obviously Mariota's like from Hawaii, so he loves the West Coast, and he played at Oregon, so he loves the West Coast. Chip Kelly connection.
Didn't he play? Didn't he play in Vegas at one point?
Yeah, he was in Vegas. Yeah, he was with the Raiders at 1.2 as well. So he knows that organization. They know him, so it would have been a good spot for them before they traded for Geno Smith, obviously. And obviously the Colts had they're having a QB battle, so I know he probably wanted to maybe get the chance to go out there and battle with Anthony Richardson. I think Marcus Mariota paired up with Shane Steichen would have been great for Mariota because it's kind of like that Cliff Kingsbury style of offense where it tailors to the quarterback in that run game or what he can do with his legs. But yeah, all in all, the options weren't out there for him. So I think he said if the grass isn't greener, always greener on the other side. So I guess if you're gonna be a backup in this league and at this point in your career where you might get a couple snaps here and there, but you're really just kind of here to be that stable voice in the room and help the starter. Why not be at a place where you actually love going to work every day, like he's been talking about? So, yeah, I was a little bit surprised at Mariota State only because of the options that were potentially out there for him.
In honor of the question, Deluxe, I will give you two, and for two different reasons. The first one being Jeremy McNichols, because everyone and their mother
That's a
keeps
good one,
telling me
yeah.
that running back is in high regard for this football team right now, but it seems that they aren't moving anybody, and they're actually retaining running back bodies back there, of course. And then the other one that I'll supply. Oh my goodness, I had it, and then of course it's gone out of my head. It was going to be deep. Oh no, the second one is Andrew Wiley, because the craziest thing that I heard was Andrew Wiley being moved inside to guard, and I think Hall had mistaken what I was meaning in my tweet. Like,
Yeah.
because my personal opinion, you need strength and you need mass to go against the best D lines in the NFL verbatim. And moving Andrew Wiley inside makes zero sense. Brandon Coleman moving inside, being at that big, thick body that he is, the young, athletic dude, I think that he would be, like, honestly, if you were to ask the Philly defensive line, their two defensive tackles, Davis and the other guy, if you ask them, who would you rather be matched up one-on-one with in the interior? Would you rather go against Andrew Wiley or Brandon Coleman? I think they would both answer the same one, and being AW. And so I will say the biggest surprise being Andrew Wiley, specifically because people were talking about him being moved inside. Like, wait a frickin' second. Best case scenario for Andrew Wiley for you as a football team, that's your backup emergency insert in case you need somebody at guard or tackle to slide in there if somebody gets injured. That's my personal opinion. I don't think he should be your starting guard because it's sitting at 6'4", 305 pounds, going against Jordan Davis, who's 6'4", 335. That's slight work for somebody of that size, in my personal opinion. Now, the next question from Deluxe. This one is, what starting spots are clearly void heading into the draft, if any? He says, I can only think of one that is glaring compared to others.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, edge is the glaring one for me because they've signed. I mean, they got what's his name from last year, Armstrong from last year, obviously, and they've signed a couple of like 1 year like veteran type guys that are kind of going to be the band-aids for a year because they're probably going to end up drafting a guy that's going to hopefully turn out to be their 5-year guy and second contract guy. So I would say edge obviously is the glaring one.
Edge, glaring one. I think the strong safety depth is another, but we'll get into that question after we talk with our guest here, Mr. Felix Trammell. Thank you so much for joining us this Sunday afternoon, brother. How are you doing?
I'm good. How's everybody? Good to see y'all.
Yes, sir.
After the Laramie Tunsil trade, there's not much that we could complain about, Felix. They've added to the trenches on both sides of the football. They added some really hard-nosed defensive guys on the perimeter, as much as the edge defenders needing to set the edge, so to speak, in the run game. I think we needed that from a defensive back standpoint just as much as edge, right? But my question to you is, how much better did Washington get this offseason so far?
I think they got stronger, and I think you saw Adam Peters' mindset with the players. I know everyone's like, you need to end, you got to get the quarterback, Washington's biggest deficiency was stopping the run, and I think that NFC Championship game was a glaring game. But let's just go back in the season. Go to the Ravens game. That was a very winnable game.
Mm-hmm.
The defense couldn't stop the run. You know, you see that first Cowboys game. The Cowboys were able to establish the run in that second half, and that's what kept them there, and they ultimately won that game. The Steelers were able to run the ball with some efficiency. So I think that became the goal of the offseason. But they had to just get more physical, and I think they did. Now, the one loss I do kind of see is Chin, but Harris can be a Chin because he can cover better. And what Joe Witt was able to do with the defense is not have Shannon coverage much. He was able to cover that up. But eventually that did get exposed in certain games, and that ultimately cost the defense. So I think they did get better. Now, did they go sign every like all Madden team player? No, but no one's going to sign every all Madden team player. But they did get better. And I think these players that are coming in now see what's there and they want to achieve more. So I think they did get better. Now, are they, Super Bowl favorites? No, but they did get better.
Absolutely. I would imagine that's what Jerry Jones is saying to the fan base at the moment regarding the offseason. Sorry, Hall.
No, so I know a lot of, like you said, the fans were looking for all the money cap space they had, that they would just be in on all the top guys at all the top of the list at every position, and like DJ Reed or Holland or guys like that. But they kind of followed the blueprint of last year, where it was the low key signings, the guys that we think that are fit our culture. And obviously they made some trades that kind of, you got to add all that into free agency as well. What was your favorite move that they've made between the trades and the signings and free agency so far?
I just like the Larry Tunsil trade because guess what? We didn't know about it.
Yeah.
I think that's the beauty of this new era. You didn't know about it. Now, we knew they were going to look for offensive line help, but no one knew that it was going to be Larry Tunsil. And so that shows I've got to protect this stud. Then that's not to say that Brandon Coleman's not a good tackle, but if you can go get a top 3 guy at a position, you go get a top 3 guy. And that's what they did. So that automatically makes the offensive line better. So I think that move is my favorite move, but I kind of like these moves that he's doing, like these short 1-2 year deals, because guys can't settle. Like, I got to work. Like, I've got to push hard, because some of the knock on some of the guys we've had here, there's still a D lineman here, Payne, that got his money and he seemed to have regressed. And, people are like, well, they got paid now, I'm on my laurels, yada, yada, yada. Now, if I'm on this 1 year deal, I've got to do everything I can for this 1 year deal. And so that's a different mindset. Now, it's going to make the defense a little bit more fluid as far as personnel, but the system's intact. The core of the defense is intact. You're just adding some pieces to it. So the Tunsil trade is my favorite, but I do like the other moves in there. 2 years here, 2 years here, a year here, because it's going to make those guys work harder to try to achieve their ultimate goal as well.
Man, how far we've come, Felix. Wasn't that long ago that we would have been jumping backwards for a trade for a wide receiver like Debo. And look at us celebrating the most with adding in the trenches, of course.
Right.
But my question for you, sir, do you think that Washington has another trade in the cards? I'm continuing to hear about Trey Hendrickson. I want to ask you.
Now, it's Cincinnati's giving out big contracts. Now, eventually, these big contracts have to add up. They've already paid Burrow. They just made Jamar Chase the highest paid non-quarterback. T. Higgins is on a franchise, which means you've got to pay him. How many big contracts can you really have? And then they have so many flood of issues because they pretty much revamped their offensive line. They've lost a couple pieces on defense. Like, there's a lot to do in Cincinnati. Hendricks, it's a fluid situation, because I think more than actually Myles Garrett, he does want to pursue other options. But if Cincinnati presents a number, he's comfortable. I think Myles wanted to leave until he saw that number and then was like, okay, I'll stay. And, winning aside, whatever, money is money. I will never knock anybody for their paycheck. But I think Hendricks has something out there, and I do think they're going to add another receiver, because there's still some decent line receivers. You're talking about a Stefan Diggs, Allen's out there,
Elijah Moore.
Moore. There are some guys, and I think one of those receivers will get signed here, and then all of a sudden you're lining up with Terry, Debo, and whoever that receiver is, with Noah Brown behind them, who can play anywhere, and now the offense looks totally different. And I didn't even mention Zach Ertz. So I think that's going to be the next move, or probably one of those receivers that's sitting around, that's looking for something, but then they'll see the opportunity to come to Washington to play with Jaden, to play in that offense that put up numbers and play opposite of Terry McLaurin. And with Debo, that's a chance to excel.
Yeah, and since we're talking about the offense, sticking with the offense, I know there's been a lot of talk about adding like a home run hitting type running back to this offense and what it could do to elevate the running game, not only with like the running game itself, but with Jaden as well. Um, they have 3 picks in the top 150 right now, 1, 2, and 4. I think we all think they're going to add a couple more here and there. But do you see them adding like a running back like that, to, that status in the top 150, or do you think that in their minds, improving the offensive line is going to help B-Rob in the running game as well, and they're going to kind of take a backseat for a running back for right now? But I will say B-Rob is also, I think it's last year of his contract, so they kind of do need a younger running back to kind of fill in and be the future.
Yeah, so I do see a couple options here. I do think they do draft a running back. I do think they draft a lineman, and I do think they draft a defensive edge in those 3 picks. Whatever the order is whatever the order is. There's a lot of running backs in that draft that can help you, that you can get in the second, third round, that can really help, and that value will be there where you'll have them control. Because, like you just mentioned, this is last year of B-Rob's contract. Eckler's been very serviceable, which you don't know. He's at the latter stages of his career. So then you might need 2 running backs, in the future. So you want to have that next young kid that's ready, that can jump in. So I do think they do draft one of these younger guys. I mean, but there's so many people. Like, everybody's thinking about JT and all those sort of things. But they're guys that's going to be in the second and third round that are absolute ball players that Washington will be able to get and give them more of that burst that they miss. Jaden Blue from Texas. Yeah, I'm a Texas fan. Jaden Blue ran a 4.3 in the 40. He's going to be there in the second, third round. That type of speed is something that Washington on offense will look for in that running back. So I do think they attack that in the draft.
Yeah, Blue, I think one of his best games was against Texas A&M, if I'm not mistaken. He had at one point 90 yards after contact. Yeah, it was incredible watching what he did. But on Twitter, we had a question. So to wrap this up, only a couple more questions for you, Felix. I haven't answered this yet, but you commented and you said you wanted to happily answer it. So I'm going to give you the reins first, right? This question was from Just Your Average Fly Guy. Sorry, his name is really funny. He said, it's always a good thing to go to church. We give our thanks, praise, and worship in his words and sing songs that lift up God's name, which leads me to my question for the pod. I saw an anti-religious group wrote a 4-page letter condemning Deion Sanders for letting a pastor lead the team in prayer after a win versus Baylor. How relevant do you think prayer is in the locker room before games and post games, and do you all have a problem with it?
Now, to answer that question, there's a lot of faith and a lot of prayer in football. Mm-hmm. Now, the NFL doesn't promote it. They always say faith, they say family, but that's the word for prayer. And they don't want to, section out just one religion, because there's, there are other religions other than Christianity, but there's a lot of prayer. Starting with our quarterback, Jaden Daniels is a very spiritual guy. There is a Bible in his locker. He's a very spiritual guy. And he's been based in a church his whole life. And there's a lot of guys like that. And I don't want to put out people's personal business that I know, but they pray. There's prayer all the time. There are certain teams that have priests that travel with them. The New York Giants have a priest. It's been the same Catholic priest at least 30 years. It might be longer, but I met the gentleman 15 years ago, and he probably had been doing it for 15, maybe more. A Catholic priest, and he travels with the team, and they do that. The team prays a lot. There's a lot of prayer there, and you see them run out after the introductions, go in the end zone and say their prayers. There's a lot of them that pray after the game. We have a few Muslim players too that are very devout, and because to be in that job, that is one of the hardest jobs in the world. Everyone's like, it's a game, it's fun, but you make one mistake and the whole world sees it, and all it is you on ESPN for a week. Mm-hmm. Like, I can even take it back to a couple nights ago, the Carolina Duke basketball game where Jalen Withers steps in the lane on a lane violation. He's always going to be remembered for that, and that's a college kid in an ACC tournament game. Imagine you in the Super Bowl, and you drop a ball, or there's something that you've done your whole life and you do it. So these players live in the moment because they know the moment can be very fleeting. We see the unfortunate injuries. We see people's careers end. So there's a lot of faith in football. So To answer that person's question, it's very prevalent. The Commanders, they pray a lot. They have their groups, they have their own stuff where they do that. I'm not going to share everyone's personal name because that's their personal beliefs. And if they want to speak on it, they want to speak on it. But the NFL is a very religious place. It's just not promoted that way because there are some that don't believe in God, and that's their belief. That's their choice. But Washington, the Commanders are a very faith-based group.
Love to hear it.
I'll just say it like that. I'll just say it like that.
You're good. You're good. And you answered it perfectly. I appreciate you for doing that. I wanted to hear your thoughts on the matter, and you hit it out of the park. But my next two questions for you to bring this back to football. If you were to say which is the bigger need, backup middle linebacker or backup strong safety right now?
It would be safety. I do think that the linebacking core is strong. I think Bobby Wagner was amazing, but I think they're ready. They can do other things with that. Safety is thin right now. And Harris is kind of going to be this rover guy who can cover slot and do these sort of things. But I still think you get another safety in here. And that's probably the DB they go with versus a corner, because you do have Lattimore. You do have Mikey. They re-signed Noah. Harris can play in the slot. Now you have very versatile people now. For corner, the safety is where it gets a little thin because there is a drop off from Quan to Percy, and no offense, but Percy is a deep cover one type safety, cover two back there. Quan can kind of be more versatile, but he's better down than back. And Washington doesn't have a safety that's really good playing back. So I think that's something that they will address. So that's the bigger need. That's the bigger need over linebacker, because I think you can figure out linebacker because they have a deep enough linebacking core at the moment.
Yeah, it would make a lot of sense. I think they met with a guy named Malachi Moore from Alabama, who is a deep safety in this draft, who is kind of falling towards the back end, which would fit really well with Washington. Right. Now, my last question for you, sir. Do you think there's enough depth at wide receiver and corner?
I do not. I still think you need to add. Like I said, I still think they get a free agent receiver. I still think they do, and they may draft a late round receiver. But I do think that both need another player. I think wide receiver they will go the free agent route, and DB corner they'll go the draft route, and just try to find a kid. There's a couple kids like in the 4th, 5th round that are very long and speedy that you can coach up. That you wouldn't need them as day one starters, whoever day one is. But you can have them as depth and build them along to be productive players. So I think that's the route they're going to go. But I think both needs a few more depth. But wide receiver will be the free agent route. DB will be the draft route.
Absolutely. Love to hear it. Felix, I can't thank you enough for joining us, being able to talk with us about this whole offseason and how well it's going, because the sky is falling for everybody that wanted all the top-tier guys, like you had said before. But before you get out of here, I'd like to plug your social media handle, sir.
Yeah, BCommander2407. I'm on X, I'm on Blue Sky, I'm on IG, whatever you want to find me. And getting ready. The draft is coming soon. I mean, it's best time of year. Like, this is that kind of lull period. But that draft comes and rookie OTAs, and then it's time to go. It's time to go. So I can't wait.
It seems like it's happening so slow, but it's going to come up fast, Felix. I can't thank you enough, sir. I hope you have enjoyed an amazing Sunday, sir.
You too. Thank you all for having me on.
Thanks,
yes,
Felix.
Sir.
All right, everybody. We just spoke with the man, Mr. Felix Trammell. Always appreciate Felix's time.
Definitely.
Especially. But I wanted to finish with what Deluxe's question was, which I do have to go back and find before I answer Fly Guy's question. Because that, honestly, out of all the questions that we have been asked on this show, I think Fly Guy's question is the best I ever received. I put that on Twitter. I hope you don't mind this. This episode is gonna go a little bit longer than an hour. Obviously, you got here a little bit late, but it's all good, right? But the question from Deluxe was, what starting spots are clearly void heading into the draft, if any? I do think that the guard spot is something that has to be addressed. Either they already did it. Obviously, they added Nate Herbig, right? But he missed all of last season with a rotator cuff injury. But that's a guy who's being like 6'4", 336 pounds. That's just what the doctor ordered for that guard spot. Now, they're comfortable with that being the starting job. Let's go. Let's kick the tires and get going. But I think that that's one area, that's a question that needs to be answered, not necessarily in the draft or free agency, but just from the team on who's going to be where. And obviously, they're not going to tell their opponents what they're going to do up front until we get closer to it. But that's just my opinion. But I do think the young edge rusher is the clear void. I would imagine that you're going to probably think the same thing in that regard. And I think that strong safety is another one, but we got to talk about Tyler Owens. And is he ready to compete for that starting job? Missed a lot of time last year, but that's a big kid. He was a force on special teams to the point they had to dedicate more bodies for him. And so I think that strong safety is something that has to be discussed because obviously Harris coming in here could obviously fill that void for you, of course. But like I've told you guys before, the best way to build a roster is by looking at every single player saying, we expect him to miss a lot of time. And so you have to have that backup plan and be comfortable with that backup plan at every single position. And strong safety, guard, and middle linebacker are those spots in edge rusher you're looking at to say, do they really have that comfortability in that depth if they were to start mindset, right? I know they added Wise, which I love Wise. I love his story. I love the way he plays the game. But we also had to come into the realization that we need speed down there. And that's something that we did kind of lack of at times, even with Dante Fowler. But he had double-digit sacks, but it wasn't like that speed, that pass rush was something you had to game plan against. And that's what I'm really eyeing towards, is adding that piece on the defensive line that teams have to game plan for, in my personal opinion. Now, the last question from Arch Hall. Free agency appears to be tweaking of the offense and much more thorough retooling of the defense. Imagine that. Who said that? Does this change how you think they will approach the draft?
No, I think that going back to last year, you saw that Adam Peters is, just because of, not to rehash the past, obviously, but there's no first rounders on this team from the last couple of years due to Ron Rivera, and there's not a lot of draft picks left on this roster. So that's why you've seen him go out and trade draft picks away for proven talent, veteran guys that that are going to be what you're going to get out of them on Sundays and beyond. So they still need like talent on this team. They're talent deprived as far as like overall. Like there's talented players obviously on both sides of the ball, but just as overall, they don't have a lot of blue chip players. So you're going to see them trying to get those top 100, those top 50, 150 picks to kind of keep drafting those core players, which is also goes to your point of earlier about the 1 year, the 2 year deals, because they're just trying to kind of patch together the roster while still drafting up the core players. And then 2-3 years from now, you're going to have those core players already here. And that's when you're going to start seeing more of like the big swings and the big trades, like more of big trades and more big signings, I feel like, in free agency. So I don't even remember what the original question was, but the defense. Yeah. I think that you've seen that what the offensive side of the ball where they've kind of got the core as far as the left tackle, the wide receiver, the quarterback. So now they got to get the core on the defensive side of the ball. They got a cornerback, tight end as well. They need a tight end on offense, but they need
I don't think they do.
Well, I'm saying like in the future, like Zach's not going to be around forever, but we'll see. Yeah, so I think the defense side of the ball, they're not going to like focus the entire draft towards the defensive side of the ball, but I do think if they see a best player available at 29, 61, whatever pick it may be, I do think it'll be a defensive player just because they need that young core on defense to be built up a little bit more.
The last question was, does this change how you think they will approach the draft?
Oh, no, I don't think so at all because like I said earlier, I think that they'll still go best player available or they'll trade back. They have many, many avenues and many, many options available to them. And it's all about how Adam Peters, like I said, how he sees the board and how he's graded out player 30 to 40 something on his big board. So I think that more than likely they'll stay at 29 and try to trade back at 61. But I think that, it'll be a defensive player probably more than likely. But again, best player available, we'll see.
Yeah, and I love this question from Deluxe because it wasn't too long ago that I talked about. I thought like the real investment was going to be much more based on the offense because that's the now you need the production there. but the long-term view of building up that defense to be able to do the seesaw effect of balance when Jaden Daniels' contract does come up in a couple years would really pay dividends for a quarterback like him if you do have to bring down the assets on offense because you are paying the quarterback. So do I think it changes how they will approach the draft? Not at all. I think this was the game plan all along. And I think that they really are. When you just look at this draft class, I've done a lot of investigating into the edge rushing class, the linebackers, the safeties. The talent there is evident, and it's in the trenches, especially on defense. They've already added the collection of what they feel is necessary by adding weight and mass up there up front, but you do need that spark. You need that explosion, so to speak. And I think that they knew that coming into this that's what they were circling, and to say that that's the best avenue for success because the tackle class, left tackle or right tackle, it's hard to be able to get a draft pick to start. And obviously they got Brandon Coleman in the third round, but they obviously felt more comfortable going down the route Laramie Tunzel, and bless their heart for doing that. But I don't think it changes their aspect. I think this is just according to plan, and they're going to be comfortable at 29 or trading back of being able to get somebody in here that they can coach up and do really well. I would highly recommend going and watching Nick Scorton's film in 2023 when he was at Purdue, and you'll be able to watch him there because he's at lesser weight than he was at Texas A&M this year. And when you see what he's able to do, I think you'll see a lot of comparisons with a guy that Dan Quinn used to coach. And there's another guy from Marshall who has a lot of comparability to what a player that Dan Quinn used to coach in Minka Persons. And so I think there's a lot of possibilities there. And I know that Coach Quinn really likes to jump off, to get off the line of scrimmage, at explosion. And James Pierce, another guy you got to bring up, but the lack of finishing is what honestly scares the crap out of me when it comes to James Pierce, to be honest with you. But no, I don't think it changes their aspect in the draft. I think this is according to plan, and I applaud their mindset because when you look at the corners and the safeties that they brought in, they come up and they're willing to stick their head in the mud and get dirty in the run game. And as much as we talked about the edge rushers needed to be able to set those, these guys doing on the perimeter can help you that much more if your middle linebacking core is not the best at getting sideline to sideline, so to speak. You need those perimeter guys to be able to come up and make something happen, and that's obviously what they saw this one, and they've done a good job, so I would say it's according to plan what they're doing so far. Now, the last question we have is what was submitted by Just Your Average Fly Guy. Do you want me to say it again?
No, I remember the question.
All right, you want to answer it?
I mean, Felix pretty much answered it pretty much perfectly the way I was going to answer it, which was it's football and faith are kind of interweaving together as far as, again, like he talked about, there's prayer before the game. After, even going back to when I was in high school, we prayed. There was like a prayer before the game, or before we would go out and run out onto the field, or before we got out the locker room, I should say, and then went out into like did a little hype thing and got onto the field. But yeah, you see guys like run out and player introductions, run out, do their little celebration, hype the crowd up, drop on one knee, give their faith and do their little prayer. You see guys when they score touchdowns, they drop to a knee, say a prayer. So football and faith have always been interweaving, always been intertwined. They've always been like peanut butter and jelly. They just go together. And yeah, like Felix said, the NFL is not openly like promoting it because there's so many different religions, so many different players, so many different people throughout the NFL. Not only that just play, but work for the NFL as well. So it's definitely goes hand in hand. And yeah, I have no problem with it. Like I said, I grew up playing football, so it's just always been a part of my life as well. So I've never had a problem with it. It's always just been just secondhand to me because my football career.
Yeah. This was a great question. With the anti-religious group wrote a 4-page letter condemning Deion Sanders for letting a pastor lead the team in prayer after a win versus Baylor. How relevant do you think a prayer is in the locker room before games and post games? First and foremost, I absolutely love Deion Sanders and the way that he carries himself. He's not a man of excuses, which is why I was very put off by what Ryan Clark said about Shedeur Sanders falling in the draft. To be perfectly honest with you, I find that to be an incredibly ignorant take. I do question how much film Ryan Clark puts in, and somebody on Facebook said, he played the game at the high level. How dare you think you can know more than him? I'm not saying that I know more than him. All I'm saying is I've watched the film on him, and there's obvious reasons for why he would be falling, besides his skin color, which is an ignorant thing to say after last year. Black quarterbacks went 1-2. And not to mention that Cam Ward is going to be the number 1 quarterback drafted. He's not falling. Why? Probably because he has better film on tape. That being said, I love what Deion Sanders does. And I love that he carries himself in such a way that does cause issues with others. This is nothing new to Christians all throughout our lifetimes and going back to even Christ himself. This is nothing new. There's always somebody having a problem with something. But the fact is, all you're doing is leading in prayer. You're not hurting anybody. You're not putting anybody down. You're just saying a prayer. There should be no issues with it. How prevalent do I think it's in locker rooms? It's not just locker rooms. It's everywhere. And typically a lot of people will kind of keep that private because the world that we live in, everyone wants to be upset about something. And of course they're kind of put off by it. They kind of feel a certain way regarding it because of how religion is pushed through certain entities. But I will say it's very relevant because, like Felix had expertly talked about, anything can happen in a second. And the fact is, all prayer, speaking from somebody whose own personal testimony is, this isn't me thinking. This isn't me hypothetically talking. Like for me, I know prayer works. Like that's in my personal relationship, my personal things that I went through. And I know for a fact that God exists and Jesus walks among us. And all I'm going to say is, those people could say what they want, but that's nothing new to what we have dealt with throughout the entirety of Christianity. So all I'll say is I'm happy that you guys have an issue with it. You're more than welcome to do that. But if you really want to have a discussion about it, let's come on down and let's sit down and why you haven't followed prayer and why you haven't gone and finding that Jesus Christ is your Lord and Savior, which is a whole nother rabbit hole. I'm sure there's going to be people in the comment section of this show having an issue with me saying that. But at the end of the day, I honestly do not care. I really do not. And this is a very clear cut and paste thing for me personally. I have no problem with Deion. I do have a problem with the people having an issue with Deion Sanders doing it because at the end of the day, like, why Baylor? You know what I mean? Like, why Baylor? Why against Baylor is that an issue? That's just very weird. It just seems like they have an issue with Deion Sanders and they just found something.
Well, I think it didn't have to do with Baylor. I think it was just the fact that he led a prayer after the fact that they won, like in the locker room. It could have been a win against.
I'm sure he does that after losses too.
Yeah, of course he does. It could have been a win against Northwest High School, and they had a problem with it because they won, and there was prayer involved in it. And so, yeah. Also, it's Deion because Deion's a polarizing figure. So you either love him or you hate him, and I think that they obviously fall on not the hatred side, but the dislike side because of their beliefs. And as far as Shador goes, I don't think it has to do with his race. I think it's more of the fact that
tell that to Ryan Clark.
I know. You know how ESPN is, man. But
I'm tired of that excuse.
But nah, I think it's more of the fact that he just comes off as cocky and like overconfident and da-da-da-da-da. Yeah. And I guess
he should be.
He should be. Like, but I think like you don't really see quarterbacks do that through the media, and like when they're doing interviews and in person. It's more of like behind the scenes or in the locker room, or like your teammates will tell you about how they are, like da 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 da. And so like the GMs and the scouts are kind of like, well, he's an entitled da 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 because he's Deion Sanders' son, and they just look at it like he skated through life because of Deion, not really like based off his talent. So I feel like, and they're looking at him like he comes off like he's better than us because of he's Deion's son and da 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 da. When reality, that's just, I want my quarterback kind of cocky and confident. You know what I'm saying? Like I don't want him all like just kind of quiet and like, I know Jaden kind of comes off as quiet, but everyone knows on the field the competitive dog comes out in him. It's just that competitive dog is always on display with Shador Sanders. It's not just in the locker room or on the field. So people don't know how to really adjust to that.
Yeah, that's just, he's taking the personality of his old man, and
exactly. And Deion had the same thing. The media people were kind of like taken aback and kind of like, oh, why is he coming at us like that towards Deion? He's just the apple don't fall far from the tree.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, I actually really like Shador Sanders' film. Like he has a big frame.
I think he can be like a Like a Geno Smith type quarterback,
Right.
honestly.
He's a thick dude. He has his fastball and his football is incredible. He does a good job of being able to put that ball on a rope to get to the outside. The big issue with Shador is that in these situations where he's under pressure in terms of actual pressure in his face, he seems to panic because he doesn't know what to do. It creates a lot of grounding possible penalties. It creates these issues where he's throwing the ball outside on a hitch route when he shouldn't be throwing it late. You throw that early, but because that pressure's in his face, is in the end zone, he throws it late, leads to a pick six. And that's why, in my personal opinion, Shador Sanders is falling in the draft. You didn't have these issues with Jaden Daniels. You didn't have these issues with Cam Ward. When Cam Ward was under pressure, he elevated his game. I.e., watched the Ole Miss film, and what he was able to do in that game is incredible. And it's not to take anything away from Shador Sanders. It's okay if a quarterback falls. It happens. It has nothing to do with their skin.
Aaron Rodgers fell in the draft, and he's one of the best of all time. You know, like it happens.
I just cannot. I honestly, as a professional analyst, I just have a severe problem with the easy excuses, and that's what I meant by the opener and saying that Deion Sanders is not a man to make excuses, and I'm sure he's not going to make excuses for his son.
Of course
and
not.
that is a disservice to Shador Sanders. By telling him, by saying that's why he's falling, means that he doesn't have to work at anything else.
And that's why people are kind of thrown off, because he's been coached by Deion his whole life. You don't think his biggest critic has been Deion?
Right.
You don't think Deion's been over his shoulder his entire life talking about this is how they're going to treat you, this is how they're going to look at you, da 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 da. So at the end of the day, he's been prepared for this since probably high school. So he'll be all right.
Absolutely. And speaking of it, Colorado, look, we could talk about his offensive line being crap. I get it. I 100% get it. But what do you think is going to happen in the NFL?
Yeah, you're not going to be perfect for your NFL either.
It's not going to be perfect. You're not going to have a perfect pocket to sit in all the time. You're going to have pressure in your face and how you're able to handle yourself. And I could see why teams are hesitant to be able to draft Shador in the first round to lead their franchise, seeing what they see on film, because it is a concern. There's nothing wrong with that. Has nothing to do with what Ryan Clark said, but go off, man. Do your thing, make your money. I have no issue with it. It's just I have an issue with people trying to come at me for having that opinion on it when in reality I watched it. I highly question if Ryan Clark actually watched any film. But that's it for us on this episode, boys. Do you have anything you want to end with?
No, just like you said earlier, just to all the people out there that the sky's falling because we didn't sign this player, we traded away this draft pick for this player. All I'm going to say is, like I told Nelford on Twitter, just because they didn't sign the big name player or the player's name that they know, all of a sudden they didn't do their job. They didn't vet enough. They didn't take enough avenues, enough routes, uncover enough rocks to kind of make this team better. When in reality, they did the same thing last year and everyone had the same excuses. They said the same thing last year, and they made it to the conference championship game. Not saying it's going to be a repeat of last year, but obviously, like everyone's been saying, let Adam cook, and AP we trust. So I've been taking the whole route of until they give me a reason to criticize them, okay, I'm going to let the process play out. So I feel like everyone else should kind of take that advice as well too.
Yes, and after a year of being here, this coaching staff and front office know what they want. They know what they're requesting. They know what they want their identity to be, what their identity is, and keeping that, sustaining it. And I wholeheartedly anticipate that they'll be able to do that. And that's what I was saying to you on Twitter last week, and saying that, stop being excited about things that will disappoint you. Rather just be really excited about what is brought to you. And later that day, they got Will Harris, right? They ended up going to get Jay Jones and then trading for Laramie Tunsil and other things. So as much as Twitter is based on literal nonsense just being floated out there all the time about getting hyped about this and every guy. Oh, we could have got better. Blah, blah, blah. I understand that, but you can still get better. We know this. Just look at what they're doing, and it's based on motivation, getting the most out of a guy. And all their trades, every single time they traded for a guy, it's on the existing deal. They haven't given him a big deal up front, which was my whole argument about Brandon Ayuk. That is a complete contradiction to what you're trying to build, and thirsty dogs run faster. You can't just bring a new guy in and give him a bunch of money and then tell everyone else you got to earn it. That's a very big contradiction to do as a football team. So expect those kind of lower end deals for guys that come in and make it worth their while to the point where they can go make money like Jeremy Chin and Diami Brown did, which all the credit to them. But that's why we are a farm. We build the crops, we sell the crops, we don't buy crops. All right, everybody, that's going to wrap us up for this episode. I'm Kyle.
I'm Hall.
And we'll see you guys again on Wednesday. Reed forgot his laptop when he was DJing last night, as he says. So make sure you give him a bunch of crap on Twitter, all right? Because it's been like, 2 weeks now? All right, everybody. We'll see you again possibly Wednesday or another day if I come up with a random interview here or there. I'm not sure if the boys will be able to. I worked nights this week, so I was able to interview with Trevor early, and the guys are obviously still at work. But we'll let you know. But anticipate Sunday, but possibly earlier if something comes up. All right, everybody. I'm Kyle.
I'm Hall.
And we'll see you guys again next week. Washington football. Woo!
Peace.
What's up, everyone? This is Kyle from the Burgundy Zone. We are releasing our own merch to support the show. If you want to rock the Burgundy Zone logo or you want to see Reed's face on your shirt, we got it. We're starting with t-shirts, hoodies, and zip-up. So if you're a fan of the show, make sure you snag one before they are gone. Check out the link in our bio on Instagram, or you can find the link in the description of the video. Thanks again for all your support. Until next time.